Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for a presentation about loan repayment and forgiveness for people who are interested in public interest work. My name is Amanda Pursoon, and I'm the Director of Public Interest Financial Support in the Financial Aid Office. I do want to acknowledge that it is Indigenous Peoples Day today. I know a lot of people are not here today to acknowledge or celebrate that. And I encourage you to look up and pay your Shumi land tax today if you haven't already. It's a great way to give back to the Ohlone people today. All right, today I'm going to cover quite a few things. It can be pretty dense. I'm going to talk about the different repayment options you have after you graduate, Berkeley Law's Loan Repayment Assistance Program, and then the Federal Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Kind of like how to use all these different programs together to figure out your own repayment strategy. Go over some of the latest student loan news because I know there's been a lot of that, and then some action items and resources you can use to help prepare. And feel free to ask questions at any time, but there'll definitely be time for that at the end as well. Okay, let's first talk about the different repayment plans that you'll use to figure out how much you're going to pay on your loans after graduation. Don't worry if you borrowed loans. I know a lot of people feel like they're the only ones or they have higher loan debt than everybody else. It's not true. 90% of young lawyers borrow student loans to finance their legal education. And the great thing is, what I really want to emphasize today is that no matter how high your student loan debt is, or what career path you're interested in, there are going to be programs that can help you manage your loan debt and reduce your expenses. What you need to know now is you don't have to pay your student loans until after you graduate. So no need to think about making those payments and having enough money to do that right now. But once repayment does begin, you're going to have a choice. Do you want to pay off your loans or do you want to try to get them forgiven? Those are essentially the two loan repayment strategies that you have to deal with. Paying off the loan means that you're going to pay the entire loan off that you've borrowed plus any interest that's accrued during law school and after law school. Your monthly payments basically depend on how high your loan debt is and how long you're going to take to pay off the loan. And oftentimes this strategy is a lot easier to manage if you're going to have a high income after graduation or you really didn't borrow that much loan debt. Alternatively, you can actually get your loans forgiven, which means you're not going to pay off the entire loan that you borrowed. Basically, after a set period of time, you pay your loans and then you get the remaining balance forgiven. Your monthly payments depend on your income instead of your loan debt, which means that it's a good option for people who might have a lower income, maybe people with a higher loan debt, and definitely people who are working in public service after graduation. Basically, depending on what repayment strategy you choose, you're going to enroll in a repayment plan. When your loans are federal student loans, they're serviced by the Department of Education, and they have all these different repayment plans you can enroll in. The standard 10-year plan is sort of the default plan. It's what you'll be put into automatically unless you sign up for something else. And it's basically based on your loan debt. You get assigned a fixed monthly payment amount that if you pay this amount for 10 years, your loans will be paid in full. You could also sign up for an income-driven repayment plan, where instead of being based on your loan debt, your monthly payments are based on your income, which means your payments actually change from year to year as your income changes. And the interesting thing is the end result is going to vary. You are not going to pay off your loans in 10 years by enrolling in an income-driven repayment plan. What happens with your loans is going to depend on your income and your loan debt. They could increase, they could decrease, they could stay the same balance for the full 10 years. And that's why doing income-driven repayment with loan forgiveness is a great option. If you do the standard plan and actually pay off your loans, the pros are your loans are paid off entirely. There's nothing really complicated about it. You just go in, you set those payments, and your loans are gone. Like I said, though, the cons are that your monthly payment can be really unaffordable depending on what your loan debt is and what your income is. And you're definitely going to pay more over the course of the 10 years that you're paying your loans off. But with income-driven repayment and loan forgiveness, your payments are going to be lower and more affordable. You're going to pay less on the loan over the course, the whole lifetime of your loan. And doing this will allow you to enroll in Berkeley Law's LRAP. There's definitely some cons, though. Definitely a lot more paperwork. You're going to have to be filling out forms every year and applying for things. And then, like I said, your loans could actually grow if your monthly payment isn't high enough to cover all the interest that's accruing on your loan every month. So pairing income-driven repayment with loan forgiveness really makes a lot of sense. Let's kind of look at some examples here. If you had $100,000 in student loan debt, to pay off that amount of debt in 10 years, you'd pay $1,100 a month, kind of just based on the interest rates that we have right now. If instead you enrolled in income-driven repayment and you had a $60K income, you'd pay $330 a month. With a $90K income, you'd pay about $580 a month. So you can see how the payment drops and becomes more affordable with an income-driven plan. If you had double that amount of student loan debt, you would pay double that monthly payment to pay off the loans in 10 years. But with the income-driven plans, your monthly payments stay the same regardless of what your loan debt is because they're based on your income. How this looks after 10 years of repayment is with $100,000 in student loan debt, paying that off for 10 years, you'll pay about $130,000 in total. That accounts for all the interest that's accrued over the 3 years of law school and the 10 years after law school. If instead you do income-driven repayment and then apply for public service loan forgiveness after 10 years, if you had a $60K starting salary, you'd only pay about $50,000 on the loans over the course of 10 years. And you'd have a remaining loan balance of about $100K that you'd get forgiven. With a $90K salary, that goes up to about $90,000 that you'd pay over the course of 10 years, and you'd have $60K forgiven. With $200,000 in student loan debt, what you pay over 10 years really jumps up. It's about $260,000 to pay off those loans. With income-driven repayment, those monthly or the amount that you pay over the course of 10 years is going to stay the same. So $50K if you have a $60K starting salary, $90K with a $90K starting salary, but the amount that's forgiven is a lot bigger because you're actually making less progress on the loan. It's growing more and more. But that's kind of the point of public service loan forgiveness, like pay as little as you can on the loans over time and then get the most forgiven. I'll show you a real life example of this. One of my friends allowed me to screenshot this and share this with you all today. This is his loan, one of his loans that he has. It's a $28,000 loan that he borrowed. He went into repayment in 2011 on this loan. He has only paid $919 on this loan so far. So if he was wanting to pay off this loan, that would be very scary. He's not even close, but he's doing public service loan forgiveness. So this is actually like the best case scenario. He's barely paid anything on the loan and he's only a year or two away from PSLF. So I wanted to show you this slide and those previous slides with the hopes of showing you like monthly payments can be pretty low and affordable, and loan repayment can be manageable even if you're doing public interest work. You might start hearing a lot about like refinancing your loans or even getting a bunch of stuff in the mail about refinancing your loans after graduation. What that means is a private company pays off your loan with the Department of Education, and then now you owe a loan to the private lender. Sometimes this could be a good option. Like if you're going into big law, you're going to have like a really high and stable income, you're trying to pay off the loan aggressively. It can give you a lower interest rate, which is good, or a payment schedule that maybe makes more sense with your plans. But I will tell you, private loans are not eligible for these things we've just talked about. Income-driven repayment, PSLF, Berkeley Law's LRAP, and a bunch of other stuff like this new debt relief plan I'm going to talk about later, or like the COVID 0% interest rate thing we've been in for the past couple of years. So be cautious. If you're at all thinking about doing any of these programs, keep your loans federal student loans. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about Berkeley Law's Loan Repayment Assistance Program, which is basically our program to help you make your payments. It's available to any JD graduate who's working in law-related public interest employment, and we give you funding to help you make your loan payments. We give it to you in this like lump sum loan that typically covers the following 12 months of payments, so you're not having to make anything upfront or out of pocket. You have that LRAP funding on hand. What you need to think about is you have to enter LRAP for the first time within 3.5 years of graduation. Once you do, you have up to 120 months of LRAP funding that you can use at any time. That's cumulative. You don't have to do it all at once. You can come in and out of the program. And then you have a 15-year span after graduation to use those 120 months whenever you see fit. The loans that are eligible for LRAP are federal direct student loans. These are the loans that you see on Cal Central when you're going to accept your loans. They could be called Graduate Plus loans, Stafford loans, subsidized or unsubsidized loans, consolidation loans. What isn't eligible are private loans. And then if you borrowed loans like a while back for undergrad or something, you might have a Perkins or Fell loan, like an older loan type. That's also not eligible, but I can help you figure out how to make it eligible. There is no maximum amount of loan debt. So any amount of loan debt for law school is eligible. If you have loans from undergrad or like a master's program, that's also included. Basically, what we have you do is just enroll those loans in an income-driven repayment plan and then help you cover that monthly payment. Like I said, law-related public interest employment is what qualifies. For most people, that's going to be a nonprofit or in government, but you can work at a private public interest firm, at a union, at an international NGO. There's some other, broader categorizations there, but you have to be careful because those jobs don't qualify for PSLF, and I'll kind of talk about that in a bit. If you are clerking, what you need to know is that if you're clerking for 2 or more years, that's great. It qualifies for LRAP regardless. If you're clerking for less than 2 years, to be eligible for LRAP, you actually have to go into public interest work right after that clerkship. Essentially, LRAP isn't for people who are clerking for a short period of time and then going to a firm. For LRAP, if you're making $80,000 a year or less, you're going to get 100% LRAP support where you have no out-of-pocket payments on your loans. If you're making over 80K, you're going to pay a prorated amount, or LRAP's giving you a prorated amount of support, and you're kind of paying part of it too. What that is you pay 25% of your income over 80K to your loans out of pocket, and LRAP steps in and pays the remainder of your monthly payment amount. We have a new 120K income cap, so you can participate in LRAP as long as you're making below $120,000. There's some interesting rules about like if you're married and your spouse makes more than you, we'll take that into account. If you have dependents, there'll be some deductions. Definitely come talk to us if you want to know how that might impact you. How this kind of looks is like if you had a $400 monthly payment, you were making $70,000 a year, you're paying nothing out of pocket, LRAP's giving you $400. With that same monthly payment and a 90K income, you actually have an out-of-pocket contribution. It's 25% of your income over 80K. That's about $208 a month. So LRAP's giving you $192 a month to cover that full $400 monthly payment. With a $600 monthly payment and a 70K income, again, LRAP's giving you the full $600. With a 90K income, that out-of-pocket contribution is the same. It's based on your income, not your monthly payment. So LRAP support is kind of bumped up to cover that higher monthly payment that you have. So you can see how LRAP, what we give you is based on both what your monthly payment is and what your income is. This is my last LRAP slide. These are places where people who are getting LRAP support from us right now are working. I want to just emphasize that LRAP serves a lot of people, anywhere between 200 and 300 graduates a year. It's a pretty highly utilized program. I believe about 50 graduates from every class year end up entering LRAP sometime within that 3.5 years after graduation and using the program. So please, if you're at all thinking about doing law-related public interest employment, come talk to us and take Berkeley Law's money. All right, let's talk about public service loan forgiveness. This is the program that's going to help you deal with your remaining loan balance after making those payments. PSLF is basically an incentive program that was created by Congress to encourage people to go into public service careers. It says that in exchange for working in specific types of public service careers and making payments on your loans for 10 years, you can get your entire remaining loan balance forgiven tax-free. The great thing to remember that a lot of people aren't aware of is It can take you as long as you need to get to the 120 months. It doesn't matter if you work in private employment right after law school, sometime later. The Department of Ed doesn't care about any of that. Whenever you get to the 120 months of qualifying payments and employment, that's when you apply. There are 4 main PSLF requirements that you have to be aware of. You have to have the right types of loans, which are direct federal student loans. They're the same loans that are eligible for LRAP that I've already covered. Private loans aren't going to qualify. Those refinance loans won't qualify. And again, those Perkins or FFEL loans, these older loan types, they're also not eligible, but you can actually consolidate them and make them eligible. So again, if you have an older loan type, come talk to us and we can help you figure out what to do with those. You have to put your loans in a qualifying repayment plan. So all of the income-driven repayment plans qualify. I've been talking about it like as if there's one plan. There's actually like 5 different ones. They're all going to qualify for PSLF, and you can sort of choose which one works best for you. That 10-year repayment plan also qualifies for PSLF, but it doesn't really make sense because you won't have anything left after 10 years. Again, you kind of want to pay as little as possible and get the most forgiven if you're committed to PSLF. There's some other repayment plans I didn't talk about today, but don't sign up for these if you're wanting to do PSLF. They're called graduated or extended plans. They kind of like last for 20 or 30 years at a time. Those don't qualify for PSLF either. Qualifying employment for PSLF. This is very important. All 501c3 nonprofits qualify for PSLF, and all government employment qualifies for PSLF. And that could be federal, state, city, county, tribal, judicial chambers, and clerkships. What typically doesn't qualify is like a non-501c3 nonprofit, like a C4 or something. Very rarely qualifies, and the Department of Education actually has a lot of discretion to figure out what they want to qualify. So stick with the C3 or government if you want it to be a sure thing. You have to be working full-time, which they say is at least 30 hours a week. And you have to be like an actual employee, so hired and paid by the employer, not an independent contractor. Like you want to be getting a W-2 from this employer at the end of the year. The great thing is it doesn't matter what you do at the job, doesn't matter what your title is, doesn't have to be law related. Everybody working for the same organization is all going to qualify for PSLF. And it also doesn't matter what your income is. So maybe your income is too high to participate in LRAP, you can still do PSLF. Lastly, you need to make these 120 qualifying payments. It sounds kind of simple, but like it has to be in the right amount, has to be on time, has to be made while enrolled in these qualifying repayment plans I talked about and while employed in qualifying employment. And you have to have a payment due. So you never have payments due while you're in school. You have a grace period after you graduate. Like making payments during these times don't qualify for PSLF. How do you actually tell the Department of Education that you are wanting to do PSLF? Well, they don't make it that easy. You have to do things on your own volition, unfortunately. So you have to submit these PSLF forms to the Department of Education. You should submit one annually and anytime you leave a job. And it's basically like you're putting in your start date, your end date, submitting that in and having your employer certified that you have actually worked there. And then the Department of Education will be like, great, it's a qualifying employer, and this is how many qualifying payments you've made so far. Then you don't apply for PSLF until you have your 120 payments fully done. So this is something you'll do in 10 plus years from now. There's some talk about changing this up, but right now there's no like partial forgiveness, like work 5 years, get 50% of your loan forgiven. You have to do the full 10 years and then you get 100% of your loan balance forgiven. Once you apply and you've been evaluated, one day your account balance just drops to 0, and it's worthy of celebration. Especially in the last few years, I have heard from a lot of Berkeley law graduates and people who've been in LRAP that they have gotten all of their loan balance forgiven through PSLF. The program is picking up steam. It definitely works. It's real. But before you commit to PSLF, I do want to make you aware that like sometimes it takes longer than 10 years, and those requirement that you work full time. So if you can't be committed to that, maybe you might want to consider another strategy. It's going to take some time on your part to like learn and follow the PSLF rules, to do those check-ins on your loans, have a really strong record keeping ethic, which you will do by being a lawyer, but sometimes it's hard to like do that with your own stuff. So like applying that that kind of work to your own account. And then the hard thing is like initiating or navigating a dispute with your loan servicer if something goes wrong. A lot of people don't know how to do that. They don't know where to go. Don't worry, we're here for you if this happens to you. But that is sometimes how things have to get done if your loan servicer messes up. There are a ton of different tips online about how to do PSLF well, but I want to share just a couple of the ones that I think about a lot. It's like, use your legal skills that you learn here and that you're going to learn as a lawyer to advocate for yourself and understand what exactly is required of you. Read the communications that you get from your servicer in the Department of Education. It's not fun to like get these emails in your account, but they might be telling you something that you have to do and you don't want to miss out on it. Enroll in auto pay so you don't miss any payments. It's really easy sometimes for life to just get in the way and you miss payments for a couple of months, and now it's going to take a couple of months longer to get PSLF. You really want to have this like annual, at least annual checkup on your loans where you're like recertifying your payment plan, you're checking out PSLF, you're submitting the PSLF form, and like downloading and saving your payment history. And then I would really encourage you to like track your payments on your own, kind of know how far along you should be for PSLF, because if your loan servicer comes back and gives you a number, you want to know, is that right and everything's on track, or has something gone wrong and I need to talk to them? And some kind of just document everything, build this case, build this record of why you deserve PSLF. Some people ask me like, what if I don't want to, like, what if I'm not eligible for PSLF? Like I'm working at an international employer, which typically doesn't qualify, but I'm also not going to make enough money to pay off my loans. There is a rarely utilized other option. It's called income-driven repayment time-based forgiveness. What it says is, depending on the plan and the type of loans you have, if you make payments in income-driven repayment for 20 to 25 years, you can actually get your remaining loan balance forgiven regardless of your employment. So definitely for people who like aren't doing PSLF type of employment, but then can't pay off their loans. The really, really bad thing about this is when you get your loan forgiven, that's considered taxable income in that year. So you can imagine, like, what if you pay $200 on your loans every month for 20 to 25 years and your loans are growing and growing and growing? The tax burden you owe the IRS is quite sizable, perhaps even as high as the original loan you borrowed to go to school. So I wouldn't recommend this unless it's a last resort. The great thing about PSLF is it's not taxable income. Once the loan is forgiven, it's totally done and you don't have to report that on your tax return. Okay, how do we like use all of these programs together to help make loan repayment manageable? To sum everything up that we've talked about, income-driven repayment is what you'll sign up for to figure out your monthly payment and reduce your monthly payment. It's open to anyone, anyone who's a federal student loan borrower. It doesn't matter if you want to do PSLF or not. It doesn't matter if you're doing LRAP or not. Berkeley Law's LRAP is a program to help you make those monthly payments on your student loans. Your eligibility is going to depend on your income and employment, but you don't have to do PSLF. We're not making you do PSLF. We're not following up with you. You can use LRAP support without pursuing that. And then lastly, public service loan forgiveness is that federal program and a way to get your loans forgiven after 10 years of payments and qualifying employment. This is available to, again, anybody who's a federal student loan borrower, and doesn't matter what your income is or whether you're doing LRAP or not, that option is available to you. As you can see, the programs all have different eligibility requirements and purposes. You might use one temporarily while you need help and then switch to something else. You might use all three of the programs for all 10 plus years of repayment. Like I said, use LRAP if you're eligible, please, and take our money. But if you're not doing public service loan forgiveness, you might actually want to pay more than what's due on your loans to help cover any interest that's accruing on the loan and kind of like keep a hold of your loan balance. And like I said, if you aren't eligible for LRAP, you can still do income-driven repayment and public service loan forgiveness. Those options are always available to you. As an example, couple examples here, like if you're working in government, you want to work in public service for the long term, you're making less than 120,000, use all three programs, income-driven repayment, LRAP, and PSLF. If you're working in government for the long term, but you're making more than 120K, not eligible for LRAP, but do income-driven repayment and PSLF. If you're working for like a public interest law firm, do income-driven repayment and LRAP to get that funding and that support from Berkeley Law, but you'll want to be paying extra on the loans because you're not eligible for PSLF. And then what if down the line you decide you don't want to be a lawyer anymore, you're tired of doing law-related employment? Completely fine. You're not eligible for LRAP at that point, but income-driven repayment and PSLF are still available to you. I think my point is there's a lot of different ways to use all these different programs depending on your financial goals, your loan debt, your career goals, your family and personal goals. So I just encourage you to come talk to us so we can kind of figure out a plan for you. Okay, I'm going to go over some of the latest student loan changes because a lot is happening. Probably the biggest news so far as of right now is the new debt relief plan, which says that there's going to be a one-time cancellation of up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for people who are loan borrowers. What it says is that if in 2020 or 2021, your income was below $125,000 if you're an individual, or below $250,000 for households, you can be eligible for loan forgiveness. If you received a Pell Grant in college, you can get up to 20K in debt relief. If you didn't receive a Pell Grant, you'll get up to 10K. If you don't know if you got a Pell Grant in undergrad, you can go to studentaid.gov. It's the federal student aid website, and your Pell Grant would show up like right on the first page when you log in. There's definitely some fine print here. Your loan had to have been disbursed by June 30th, 2022 to be eligible. So anyone who's like a 1L and didn't borrow loans for undergrad, you don't have any loans that are going to be eligible. 2Ls and 3Ls, you probably borrowed by then, or if you have undergraduate loans, those will be eligible. Doesn't matter that you're a current student, you'll still benefit, as will people who are already in repayment. It doesn't matter if you have undergrad debt or just law school debt, or both, like you're still eligible. What we're thinking is that if you completed a FAFSA that showed your 2020 or 2021 income, I'm thinking that your relief is actually going to be automatic. We aren't quite sure. We haven't seen the application and we haven't seen people kind of like getting debt relief yet. So it's still kind of unknown. If your debt relief isn't automatic, you're going to complete an application, which they say is coming out this month. I'm getting nervous that we haven't seen anything yet, but that's what they're saying. If you were a dependent in 2020 or 2021, it's likely that your parents' income is what they're going to be evaluating there. And then I'm hearing that a lot of people like think their undergrad loans are going to be the ones that are targeted first. It's actually based on a couple of different things, but the highest interest rate loans are going to be the ones that are targeted first, which are probably your law school loans. Like the Graduate Plus loans typically have a higher interest rate than a lot of the undergrad loans. And then great news, you don't have to report this on your federal tax return, but the taxability does vary state by state. California, if this is where you file your taxes, is saying they're not going to tax it, but they have to like amend the tax code or like come up with something. So we don't know what's happening yet, but the good news is we don't think you're going to have to put this on your state or federal tax return if you're in California. Okay, PSLF news. The latest data, which is from this summer, is that 190,000 borrowers have had their loans forgiven through PSLF, this limited PSLF waiver that I'm going to talk about, and a program called temporary expanded PSLF. And that's discharged over $12 billion in student loan debt. These numbers are so much higher than they were like a year or two ago when you may have last attended this presentation. We see that most people who are applying for PSLF and are denied have not had qualifying loans that have been in repayment for 120 months. So I don't know what's happening with people if they think they're eligible and they're not yet, but this kind of shows you you really want to be on top of your qualifying payments and know exactly when you need to apply and not apply early. The program definitely got off to a rocky start. So the Department of Education has done a couple of things to fix that. The first is this temporary waiver that they introduced last year to allow prior ineligible payments to count for PSLF. That temporary expanded PSLF program I talked about was created in 2018 that allowed people who were unknowingly in the wrong repayment plan or misadvised by their loan servicers, they can also qualify for PSLF. There's a lot of things happening that are more likely to benefit you or future borrowers. They're trying to automate some of these PSLF processes and make them easier. I talked about submitting the form, and it's so horrible. You have to have a wet signature on it. You have to fax it in. They're working on fixing that. So hopefully by the time that you start doing this, it's better. And there's also a rulemaking process going on right now to improve and broaden PSLF and income-driven repayment. We've seen some of those proposed rules. We haven't seen others, but most of those changes are likely to go into effect next summer. There is this PSLF waiver that you might be hearing about that expires at the end of this month. If you're seeing updates about this, and things you might need to do. What the PSLF waiver does is it says that any time period people spent in repayment while working in PSLF qualifying employment qualifies for PSLF. Even if someone had the wrong loan type, they were in the wrong repayment plan, they didn't make a payment, they made a late payment, it really broadens up the qualifications for what actually qualifies for PSLF. I wouldn't worry about this for most current students. It's really to help older borrowers who were misinformed or didn't know what was happening. Unless you had a federal student loan debt before law school and you worked in qualifying employment when you had that federal student loan debt before law school, if that describes you, you probably want to submit PSLF forms documenting that period of employment before this October 31st deadline, and come talk to me afterward if you have any questions. Okay, a lot of people ask me, is PSLF going to go away? What happens with the next administration? We don't think PSLF is going anywhere. And if it were to go somewhere, there would be a grandfathering provision for people who are existing student loan borrowers who signed that master promissory note that you signed to get the loan. PSLF is only getting broader and more accessible, and there's changes being put into place right now through this very extensive rulemaking process to have that happen. So it is on pretty steady footing. What I would worry about more is your own journey to meet the PSLF requirements, keeping those records, fighting with your loan servicer if you have to, and just you complying with PSLF is the bigger issue. I make PSLF sound like it's this really scary and hard thing, and it kind of is, but I will say that law graduates are some of the most successful people and well-resourced people and privileged people to be able to succeed in PSLF. A lot of people have gotten their loans forgiven, and you can too, as long as you're committed to it. And we are certainly here to help you along the way if you have any questions. Okay, last update is we've been in this 0% interest rate and forbearance, no payment due thing since March 13th, 2020. You may have noticed that your loans haven't been accruing any interest for the past almost 3 years, which is fantastic. And people who've been in repayment who aren't in school haven't had to make any payments this whole time, and all of it has counted towards PSLF. So people are getting like 33 free months toward PSLF without having to make any payments. We've seen this extended 7 times in the past. It's currently set to expire at the end of this year, but who knows what could happen again. There's so many changes happening with student loans, and we keep seeing it pushed out as these new changes are implemented. But I want to share this mostly because it really shows the benefit of like having federal student loans versus private loans. Private loans, like these refinance loans that people are doing, this type of emergency relief is not available to those people at all. So again, encouraging you to think very strongly before refinancing your loans. Okay, let me talk about a couple things to think about. For LRAP and loan repayments, things are really happening like your graduation year. There's nothing you really need to do now unless you want to talk through things and kind of prepare. But I encourage you to definitely meet with us your spring of your 3L year. At that point, we're going to know how many loans have you borrowed, what are you doing after graduation, and really come up with a plan. You're going to have a grace period on your loans for 6 months after graduation where no loan payments are due. By the time of the fall of your graduation year, like after you've taken the bar exam and you've settled in, you're going to apply for income-driven repayment and apply for LRAP. And by the time your first payment is due, which is like November or December after you graduate, you're going to be able to have that LRAP funding on hand. There's a lot of things I mentioned, like a lot of paperwork involved in pursuing this option. Every year, you're going to recertify your income to update your income-driven repayment plan. You're going to apply for a new LRAP loan, and then you actually apply to forgive your previous LRAP loan that just ended. You should submit a PSLF form to the Department of Education every year to update your latest year of employment and payments that you've made. And then just do a whole PSLF overview of your account, looking at your payment history and reviewing your account for errors. What you can do now is I would log into studentaid.gov, check out your loans, see what you're working with, see who your loan servicer is. That's the private company that the Department of Education contracts with to manage your student loans. If you don't have an account with them, go register your account, update your contact information. They should be the ones who are contacting you about the 10 or 20K in loan forgiveness. And then if you're aren't sure if you have a private loan or not, a credit report is where that's going to be. If you need help, definitely come talk to us in the financial aid office. You can make an LRAP appointment to talk about loan repayment, PSLF, LRAP, and that's available to you forever until your loans are gone. So it's not only a resource you can use while you're in school. Our website has a lot of very detailed and extensive information about LRAP, but also about PSLF and the latest student loan news. So that is a good place to check everything out. Your loan servicer is going to be the one who is the expert about your specific account. If you have questions, if something's going wrong, if your payment isn't coming out, something like that, you'll talk to them. Once you do submit that first PSLF form that I'm talking about, you'll actually be able to see a PSLF tracker on your loan servicer's website that's going to show you the months that qualify, that don't qualify, and that's really going to allow you to be able to get a better sense of where you are in the PSLF journey. Studentaid.gov is the federal student aid website. That's where you're going to do things like apply for income-driven repayment or use the PSLF help tool to submit your PSLF form. And again, check your Pell Grant, check your loans. You might get into a dispute with your servicer. Essentially, what normally happens is they don't count up your PSLF payments right. They say a month doesn't qualify when you think it does. Don't worry if something like this happens. There are a lot of avenues for you to take. You can always escalate the issue with your servicer and ask for an audit, get serious with them and talk to someone higher up the chain. If that doesn't work, there's a federal student aid ombudsperson you can talk to. You can file a complaint with like a regulatory agency like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. You could even go to your state attorney general's office or congressional representative if you want to be serious about it. So there's a lot of different ways to take action on your loans if you think something's gone wrong. And we're definitely here to help you navigate that. And then student loan debt is a huge issue right now. There's a ton of advocacy orgs doing work on this. There's a ton of educational resources putting out webinars and presentations. So you might want to explore some of these places to learn a little bit more about student loan debt as well. And that is all I have today. I encourage you to come talk to us, to make an appointment. We have an appointment scheduler on our calendar. But if anyone has a question here right now, I can answer that. Yeah, go ahead. Everybody has this question. Okay, go ahead. Yes, and for anyone who's on Zoom, the question is, what happens if you die and you still have student loan debt? Student loan debt is one of the debts that goes away when you die, so it doesn't follow you, doesn't come out of your estate or your family's money. So it's good news. Don't have to worry about that. It goes away. Don't fake your own death to get out of it. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? I'll also check the chat, which doesn't have anything. Yeah.
What are the best resources for personal like record keeping, or like do you have any suggestions on the best ways to keep track of stuff? Like, is it bank statements or what should I do that?
Yeah. My best advice for record keeping would be, all of the loan servicers have like payment histories, and their website is where you're going to get that information. And sometimes it like goes away if it's old, like if it's older than a year or something, they kind of stop showing it on their website. So downloading the payment histories kind of frequently is a great thing to do. Saving any correspondence you have with your loan servicer from their website, but also if you call them, you can tell them to like email you and write down what you talked about so that you have that record on hand. And then you'll also want to save some of your own like employment records in case you don't certify an employer and something happens. So, you know, like W-2s, tax returns, if you have information like offer letters that show when you started working somewhere, or information about like when you ended working somewhere, like that kind of thing is also really good as well. Did you have a question?
Yeah, do fellowships work in the same way or something?
So, okay, so the question is about fellowships. Fellowships can be kind of tricky. They're definitely qualifying for LRAP, they're law-related public interest employment. For PSLF, what PSLF says is a qualifying employer is someone who hires and pays you. That can be kind of tricky when you're getting like an outside funded fellowship, especially like Berkeley's PIF, because you're certainly not an employee of Berkeley law. What it comes down to primarily for me is your employer willing, like your host organization, willing to say that you are an employee? Like that's what it comes down to. So if you give them the PSLF form and you say, I worked here from this date to this date, will they sign it or will they not? I've seen a lot of people, a lot of organizations say like, yeah, of course you're an employer, I'll sign this form. Others seem reluctant if they didn't actually consider you an employee. And they didn't give you a W-2 and kind of like let Berkeley law cover everything. So I would bring it up with your host organization, with an HR department, or the supervising attorney that you're going to be working with. I think there's definitely like a very strong case to be made if your host organization provides extra funding to you or like benefits. I don't know how they couldn't consider you an employee. Like that's kind of clear-cut evidence to me that they absolutely should sign the form. But for people who aren't supplementing like your funding, I would talk to them about it, because it just comes, the Department of Education like has no idea how you were funded, and they're not going to look it up. It's just, is the form signed or is the form not signed? So that's what it comes down to. Yeah, there's someone, oh, If you were at a 501c3 but on a Berkeley Law Fellowship. Oh, okay. Fellowship question covered. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Yeah.
For LRAP, you mentioned that if you're married, then your spouse's income is factored in. Is that
Yeah.
still true if you file your taxes separately?
Yes. As of right now, LRAP, if you're married, you'll report your spouse's income regardless of how you file taxes. If you make more than your spouse, we're just going to look at your income only to figure out like where you fall on the salary scale and how much LRAP support you should get. If your spouse makes more than you, we average your two incomes, and that's the number we use to figure out how much LRAP support you're eligible for. So definitely thinking about if there's another way to do this. It's on my mind, but that's how it's used right now.
Is that also true if you're in a domestic partnership or is it only together?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're in a domestic partnership, you can't file taxes jointly. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Okay. What we look at is like, if you could file taxes jointly, then we'll have you report the income. If you can't, then we don't care.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have to double check that, but I think only.
I generally try to decide if I could marry versus education because it's more than
Okay, look, why don't you should. I don't want people, I mean, like, let me put this out there. Your marital status can have a huge impact on LRAP, and it can have a huge impact on what your monthly payment is. So I completely understand the hesitancy or like the fear. Come talk to us so I can like actually look at the different incomes and kind of think about like what this might look like and what your monthly payment might look like. I'll also like put the caveat out there that while LRAP support can be hugely beneficial and allow you to reduce your expenses, on average, people get about $4,000 a year from us. Like, it's not so much to dictate your life choices. You know, like, I don't want you to not do what you want to do for $4,000 a year, you know, like, not worth it. But let's talk and like go through the numbers, you know, and don't call off your wedding just yet. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I'm going to turn this off then. Thank you everyone for coming.